Sometimes the quietest people in the room carry the loudest ideas. And yet, in a world that rewards extroversion, like visibility, networking, self promotion, many introverts feel like their brilliance gets lost in the noise. And that is something I also used to believe, listeners. Now, today on this episode of BizBlend podcast, we are challenging that narrative because success doesn't have to mean pretending to be someone you are not. I'm your host, Sana, and my guest knows this truth deeply. With nearly 30 years in corporate communications and executive coaching, she has witnessed how introverted professionals often get overlooked not for the lack of talent, but because the system isn't built to see them. She believes visibility doesn't mean volume, it means alignment. It means being recognized and promoted while staying true to who you are. So, if you have ever felt unseen at work or in meeting or pressured to just act louder to get ahead, this conversation is for you. So, listeners, meet my incredible guest, Ulrike Seminati. Ulrike, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. Okay, let's first begin understanding here the kind of a visibility paradox. Like many introverts describe it as something that they want to be recognized, but they kind of dread the spotlight. I have been that place, where I would be like sweating or like breathing faster or feeling that, anxious anxiety or, kind of be having jitters. How do you help introverts navigate that tension between wanting to be seen and also wanting to stay comfortable?
Well, in some ways, it's a relatively vast subject, but I think the very first thing that introverts need to understand is that they are not a failure or there's nothing wrong with them. I think in the corporate world, it's so much made for extroverts. It's so much valuing extrovert behavior that introverts, and I'm an introvert myself too, we end up thinking we are somehow not good enough or we are somehow not leadership material. Yeah, because we are maybe not charismatic enough, or at least that's what we think. So I think a really very first step is to accept that being an introvert carries a lot of strength. You said it in the beginning, there's a lot of brilliance in introverts. Introverted people are often highly analytical. They are great observers. They think and analyze before they speak, and that's a strength. However, it sometimes turns out obviously as a weakness because that means that they need more time to process. They will not say something for the sake of saying something. They will wait until they think I have something really valuable to contribute. And that brings us then to the next problem, actually, that sometimes it's too late for doing that, or you're like you say, sweating before doing it. But let's pick this up maybe in a second answer. But before going even into how do I speak up and how can I feel more comfortable with it, the very first thing is a mindset shift in your head, a reframing of what being introvert actually means and turning it into a strength, recognizing that there are a lot of positive points. For example, another one would be introverts are fantastic listeners. They can build lasting relationships and deep and profound relationships. They can build trust, much more long lasting trust actually than some extrovert leaders who are more superficial, and all of these are actually strengths in the corporate world. And I think strengths that people are longing for, but that we have been missing more and more, with the fast paced world. There is sometimes this discrepancy between needs to be fast, needs to be loud, needs to be quick, and quick fixes and all of that. But at the same time, people really long for something that is more sustainable, something where they can feel psychologically safe. That's also something that introverts can provide very well, and where they feel like I'm valuable enough to contribute, no matter my communication style or my personality style.
I totally agree with what you said, and I think it also gives me. I'm very sure our introvert friends out there who are listening to this conversation, it will give them that assurance that something that they would consider it as a weakness is definitely can be flipped as their biggest strength. And I also agree with you. Introverts, you know, are very good observers, listeners as well. And I think that helps in assessing the situation or understanding the demand of the situation in a very clearer, much better way. And that helps us also give better perspectives or solutions to the problems per se.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a misconception around what success looks like or what is a good leader, for example. And this is that we often um, confound volume with visibility. We think that the more we are seen, the more visible we get, or the more important we are, or the more recognized. And I think this is a great misconception because an introvert can make a much more profound point, can change the way a project, for example, is running in a much more profound way than someone who just brings up 10 little ideas all the time. And understanding that this more profound way of looking at things can bring more profound contributions. I think this is an important step to understand. I don't need to speak up 10 times in a meeting like my colleague. I might speak up once, and this one time I could have prepared even a little bit before by going into the subject before the meeting so that I am prepared already mentally. And this one contribution is worth probably 20 other contributions, which are rather superficial. And giving ourselves the chance to, how to say, to acknowledge, that this one contribution is worth as much as the others. This is also a great step because it removes pressure from us from being on all the time, from contributing all the time, from all the time jumping into the conversation, because that's not our style. And if we try to do this, then it's exactly what you said before. We start sweating. It is like, I hate it. But we think we have to do it. Instead of trying to think that, switch to something where you say quality over quantity. I can provide quality. And if I make a remark, if I say something, there's substance in it in quality. And I say much less, but what I say has great value.
I agree. I agree. And um, in many companies, performance is what gets rewarded. Like people who speak up in meetings, or like I've seen people who are aggressively networking, like winning in their lives. It looks like that on the surface level, but I would like to understand from you, Ulrike, that how realistic is it for introverts to succeed without playing that game?
I think it's realistic when you start being really strategic.
Mm.
When you use their strength of being strategic, because usually introverts are rather planning things out and can be very strategic, that you do networking, but once more, you do less, but in a much more strategic and targeted way. That means instead of trying to be visible with all the people at the hierarchy level above you, for example, yeah, which many extroverts do, they speak to everyone, they try to be very present all the time. That if you then, instead of doing that, you think, okay, who is the one main decision maker? Who is probably a second decision maker that influences my decision maker when it comes to a promotion or getting an interesting project, for example? Who are these maybe two people, maximum three? And instead of focusing on a vast number of people and speaking up everywhere, you just think about what are these people wanting for themselves, not for you, not even for the team, but we all have a proper agenda. We all have our own ambition, actually. what do these 2 or 3 people want for their own career, for their own professional situation? And how can you contribute to that? And then you shape a plan where you say, okay, I can contribute by, I don't know, making a process more effective that helps his team shine at the end, which helps him shine at the end. Yeah. So be very strategic around what kind of contribution could be one. And then actually only addressing these people very strategically by planning what you say, by having some very short, like call it stories, no long things that you have to broadcast all over the place, but very specific things you might say at, I don't know, an offsite leadership event or an offsite meeting or something like that in the coffee break, where you just plan one action, one key action. And I can tell you that one key action, to come to your question, is it realistic? One key action can really change the path of your career. If this one moment makes that person thinks, oh, I have someone in front of you, he's reflected or she's reflected, they seem to know what they're doing, they have a plan. That was a really compelling remark. I get it. I think it's more interesting. It's interesting to speak more with this person. And this one thing can shift your whole career. For me, it did it once in my life. It was a huge shift, just one single situation, not broadcasting like all my colleagues did, even though I felt like, oh God, I'll never be getting there. And yet I made it up to the C-suite by being an introvert and by having huge struggles to self-promote myself. I hated that. I still hate it today, by the way. um, which is difficult when you're a solo entrepreneur, yeah, because I have to step over that all the time. But um, but yes, I think it's realistic when you have a concrete plan.
Mm. I think it is practical, but I think it's also a tricky balance. And that really makes me wonder, Ulrike, that does the system itself need to evolve, or do individuals need to learn to navigate it smarter?
I think it's a little bit both. I think individuals who navigate it smarter, or let's call individuals introverts who navigate it smarter, can probably make evolve the system. Because not to just forget, I mean, introverts are introverts are like 50% of the population. So that means you have a lot of people out there who feel the same, but who don't say it because they're introverts. And they use a big part of their energy to hide that. So there are a lot of people who will feel the same. So I think, and that's what I'm up to too, that introverts just stand up for their strengths much more, because if they do that, or if they give it more, these strengths would become actually more clear as strengths and be more clearly seen as strengths. And that would in turn lead to changing the system slowly, for sure, slowly, but also in a pace that is maybe realistic. I think it will take a long time. But what I see coming up when I speak to people about this, introverts, extroverts as well, by the way, because they just are not aware of that dimension at all. That's not their world. Um, People often say we are so much longing for that, for having something that is a bit deeper, that is more meaningful. Everything that happens outside in the world is getting less and less meaningful. What you see on social media is less and less meaningful. But it means that at the end, people long for something that makes more sense. And shifting that this is a value and not something that is boring or slow or something like that. I think it can happen when people and introverts smartly navigate the corporate world.
Exactly, exactly. And um, I think you know it is intentional. It is intentional because um, it kind of acts as a filter, and putting away all that noise and really making our approach, especially when it comes to you know professional success, or for leaders or CEOs, for managers who may think that their introvertedness could hamper their growth trajectory. I think that intentional way of connecting, and also that strategic use of how they communicate, what they say, when they say, that actually makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what is interesting? There was a study done, and you can find information about this in a great book of Susan Cain, who did a lot of studies around introvertism in the corporate world. And one thing that came out, which might surprise some people, is that introverted leaders have more productive teams even when their team is composed of extroverted people. Because introverted leaders, it's interesting, yeah, because you think, yeah, you need an extrovert leader who's pushing with a lot of, this kind of energy and moving forward. No, actually, introverted leaders have better scores in terms of productivity of their team, especially when they lead extroverts, because they are able to give the space. As an introvert, you don't want to claim a lot of spotlight and space. It's something you're not really comfortable with. So they like to give the spotlight to their people. And this is why they thrive, why they give their best, why they feel like, wow, my work is meaningful, I can contribute, because the introverted leader gives space to their people and they listen to the people. Very often they have more empathy as well. And people feel just more psychologically safe to do whatever they do, to come up with their ideas and to contribute and to go this famous extra mile. So I think this is something very remarkable that introverted leaders actually have better scores in terms of productivity than extroverted leaders.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna go and check out the research in there. It's actually a very, very interesting one. Ulrike, thanks for sharing. Okay, and before we wrap up, I think this is such an important question around authenticity. Kind of a advanced one. Like you emphasize authenticity as key to success. I absolutely agree with that. But when it comes to corporate settings or expectations, um, like what happens when it clashes with those expectations? Like, what if my authentic self, it simply doesn't fit the company's mold?
Hmm. Well, yeah, authenticity is always a big topic in the sense that what is that actually? Um, first of all, I just want to position it a bit more clearly in my eyes. For me, authenticity doesn't mean you have to be exactly the same person in all situations of your life. For me, authenticity means you have an authentic self in your private life and certainly a subversion with your partner. Or with your family, it's a bit different once more. And you have another version of your authentic self at work. And the question is really, what is my authentic self at work? Do I have to come in and embrace everything that I consider as a weakness? Maybe not. Maybe you can be more selective with what you want to show at work. And that doesn't mean you're not authentic. But as soon as you start faking something that you're not, then it becomes inauthentic. Now, what happens when still you have done, let's say, this is my authentic self at work. These are my values. These are my no-go areas. These are my must-haves. You have kind of defined what is this microcosm around me that I want to have and that I want to accept, and that is something where I can feel comfortable. And if this clashes with the work environment, I mean, there are two approaches. It depends on the clash. If it's a clash where you think, maybe at least I can give it a try, to speak to some key people around about this clash in terms of resharing a bit how you think, and how you work. Because sometimes a clash is only there because the other person thinks that you are not doing anything because they don't hear from you. Whereas when you communicate clearly that you need time or will take time to process certain details of the situation before you come back with feedback or with the input that is asked for you, still considering the timelines and everything that people ask from you. But if you communicate that the silence that you have while you're working on something doesn't mean you're not working on something, that is just about a way of analyzing things differently. I would give it a first try to just really start communicating your way of thinking, your way of working. Because even though it's for you totally natural, For an extrovert person who is kind of communicating and broadcasting all day long what they're up to, it's not natural not hearing anything from someone. So explaining that helps them to understand and doesn't mean that everybody will embrace this idea or your way of working. But it can mean, indeed, that this person thinks, oh, okay, you're working just differently. Fine, that's fine, that's fine. As long as we get to the same result, okay. So it can be that you can remove the clash just by communicating that you have a different style and standing up for that style because you go back to question number one, because you embrace it as a strength. Now, is there still clash like they can't accept this because it is a company where they want you to network, where they want you to collaborate on everything with someone, where you never ever can, for example, work alone on something, which is for introverts super hard, if not impossible over time, to constantly working as a team because we need downtime to think, we need thinking time, we need processing time. If that's the case, then, well, I think there's just one answer to that the environment doesn't work for you. And there are environments where it works better. Now, it depends always on the corporate culture. It depends a lot on the industry. There are industries, regulated industries like, for example, pharmaceuticals, where you find much more introverts than in non-regulated industries. It's a question of culture. In more Asian countries, you have more introverted people. It's more valued than in the US, for example. Huge difference. Yeah, and Europe is also more on the US side from that perspective, more on the extrovert side. But searching for the right environment is also something that is important. You have the right to do so. As you would search for the right job, with the right tasks, you can also search actually for an environment to thrive. Who's your leader? Is this person understanding that? Is this person maybe an introvert themselves? Can you even help this person? When this person as an introvert struggles or thinks, I'm an insufficient leader because I'm an introvert. Can you as a team member even help with that? You're saying like the things that I just said and saying, hey, that's wrong what you're doing. We love that because we know that you're not coming up with non-thought through stuff. We know that you come up with things, you thought them through. And so we can kind of trust that this is making sense. So I think, yes, some clashes are too clashy. Let's thought a little like that. And you need to change. But I think it's worth giving it a try because too often we think that there's nothing to do because it feels like that. But if you look really under the surface, there are certainly possibilities to actually contribute to changing it and to make the clash smaller or even disappear potentially, and to open maybe the eyes of some people, introverts and extroverts alike, that your working style is how it is, but you will reach the goal as well in your way, and that this is a good way too. It's just an alternative way to how others might do that. I think that is important.
It is. It is. It is. Brilliant, brilliant. So, Ulrike, if listeners they would like to connect with you and would like to explore more around this, and they would also like to share their thoughts about this conversation with you, what would be the easiest way?
The easiest way is LinkedIn, definitely. I'm starting off a new Instagram presence actually on this topic, but the easiest way is certainly LinkedIn. And what I'm proposing for free also right now is a self-assessment where introverts can check where they thrive already and where they still hide, just to give them a first idea of what is going on. And I'm currently working on a full online course that is coming up in the next 2 or 3 months. So around early next year, I would say early 2026, which is fully focusing on how introverts can be valued, seen, and promoted without compromising who they are. So it's full of techniques, little techniques like speaking up in meetings, making networking work for you, for example, which one of these situations, making self-promotion work for you, and how to navigate this corporate environment by really building on your strengths instead of trying to be someone else.
Wonderful, wonderful. Listeners, I'll mention all the details in the show notes for you. So just check out along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And thank you so much, Ulrike. This was a very, very, I think, very crucial and essential conversation. I think it really, really redefines visibility not as volume or charisma, but as authenticity in motion. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And I think it's obvious that we don't need to outshine anyone to stand out, but we just need to stand fully in who we are. So keep listening, keep tuning to BizBlend. Subscribe to us, leave us a review. Until next time, this is your host Sana signing off. Thank you.